today's video, I'm going to be covering how you can improve your performance when using a shotgun. Since the shotgun nerfs to range along with nerfs to quickdraw, shotgunning has become much more difficult than in the past. Gone are the days when you can just ape in with your shotgun and map people, and if you're still trying to do this, you probably haven't seen much success. But what if I told you that shotguns are even stronger than they were before? With the techniques I'm going to show you today, you'll be able to secure kills faster while putting yourself at less risk with both pellet and slug shotguns. So if you feel like since the changes that shotguns are no longer viable or that your shotty just doesn't work, then this video is for you. And if you find any of the techniques I cover here today useful, consider dropping a like on the video as it really helps me out. With that, let's get into it. To maximize our efficiency with our shotgun, we first need to cover the basics of good shotgunning. Because if you don't have a solid foundation, when we get into the more advanced techniques, you won't have anything to build off of and it'll be harder to implement those techniques. This I'm going to keep straightforward, and it's all about referencing your radar when breaking line of sight with your enemy. You want to use your radar to understand what sides of cover your enemy will emerge from, or if they jump up and over you, you can try to take an educated guess on where they will land to line up the shotgun shot. The one thing you can do to specifically improve this skill is constantly glancing at your radar until it becomes second nature. Because when you get into the heat of battle, you want to be glancing at your radar to be one of your basic instincts or habits you do without even thinking. This will help you better read and anticipate where your enemy will be and make it easier to track them and land the most accurate shotgun shot possible. Our last foundational piece for improving your shotgunning is movement exotics. Exotics like Stompies, Transversive Steps, and Doom Marchers can all aid in how effective you are with your shotgun, since they aid in you closing the gap on your enemy faster. They do this by increasing either your sprint speed or slide distance, which makes you harder to track and harder for our enemies to anticipate when and how far we will slide on top of whatever exotic traits each specific exotic has. The one downside of these movement exotics is they can mess with your muscle memory and the overall feel of your character when you take them off. You get so used to your movement feeling a certain way that whenever you take these movement exotics off, it throws off your whole game. I recommend at least giving these exotics a try to see how they impact your game, but keep in mind they become somewhat of a crutch the more you get used to them. Overall, I kept it relatively high level when discussing the basics of shotgunning, but don't think that these methods aren't important. Practicing and mastering these basics will build a strong foundation for the techniques we are about to talk about. Getting into our first more advanced tip for shotgunning, and that's the tactic of playing your corners. This involves a combination of using your radar and positioning yourself close to cover. I would personally compare this to peek shooting with your shotgun. Peek shooting is when you strafe in and out of cover between your shots. This creates a nice cadence of dealing damage, then as your enemy tries to return fire, you are already back behind cover. This is typically done with more medium to long range weapons like a hand cannon. But this principle applies to shotguns as well. What this scenario typically looks like is you'll have an enemy you're engaging, then at some point they decide to pull out their shotgun and try to close the gap on you. This is where you can continue to peek shot and primary your opponent, but you also be able to anticipate when they'll bring themselves into your shotgun range. It's at this moment that as you strafe back out from cover, you want to simultaneously switch back to your shotty for the easy one shot. This catches a lot of enemies off guard, since they'll be expecting you to still have your primary out as you peek from cover. This technique also has the added benefit of protecting you from an initial shotgun shot, since it's likely that some of their pellets will hit the wall you're using for cover and reducing the amount of damage you would take. Another way you can play this same scenario is instead of simply strafing back out with your shotgun, you can slide all the way out and into your enemy, immediately closing the gap and using that same anticipation to get the jump on them. Now this is the more aggressive move of the two, and one that you should use sparingly, as you completely are giving up your cover and opening yourself up to getting cleaned up by another enemy after this fight. Our next tip is going to be the most important change you can make to how you shotgun, and if you're able to master it, you'll find that your shotgun actually feels more effective. This is priming your target before you shotgun them. Priming your target is doing damage with your primary first before switching to shotgun or pushing in. Now this technique isn't new to Destiny, and as a matter of fact, a lot of higher skill players have been doing this for a long time, but are often used as a defensive technique rather than an offensive one. To understand why this method, in my opinion, is now the most effective way to shotgun, you have to look at the last sandbox patch Bungie did, where they took a hard look at shotguns. To sum it up, they reduced the overall accuracy of shotguns but increased their damage fall off range, meaning you can no longer map people from up to 9 meters with a pellet shotgun, but what you can do is more damage from farther away with the pellets that do hit. What this translates to is it's actually more effective to do some initial damage to your enemy and chip away at their overall health, then use the burst damage and extended fall off damage to map them from even farther since they are weaker. You'll notice this is something I discussed in our first advanced tip for shotgunning and using cover, and both of these tips actually work together. What you'll find using this method is that you end up using your primary a lot more, and your shotgun feels a lot more consistent and even sometimes feels like it kills enemies from even farther. This technique is all about creating space between you and your opponent until you have them primed. Once you have an enemy primed, that's when you really want to get aggressive and take advantage of the increased damage fall off of your shotgun. This is particularly helpful against more aggressive opponents, since they try to close the gap on you, you'll be able to land some shots and do some damage to chip away at their health. Now for enemies that may be better at closing the gap, this is where using your cover along with backsliding can go a long way. Backsliding is when you slide away from a door or opening to create space between an aggressive enemy, and as you do, you flip around and land shots as you're sliding away. Backsliding is a great way for causing enemies to overexpose themselves, thinking we are closer than we are, opening themselves up to be primed by our primary, then cleaned up by our shoddy. Once you alter your playstyle to focus on priming your opponents first, you'll find your shoddy becomes more effective than ever. In order to be as effective as possible with the technique of priming then shotgunning, it's important to get comfortable with switching between weapons quickly and really refining your muscle memory when it comes to quick swapping between weapons to get that quick cleanup. To aid in this, it's important to have weapons, mods, and exotics equipped that make your weapons feel as responsive as possible. Starting with weapons and the roles you're going to want to look for when it comes to making your shotgun as accurate and responsive as possible, you want a combination of range and handling. For barrels, I recommend full choke, since it's going to tighten the spread on your shotgun and make it a touch more accurate. Another option I like is barrel shroud, since it'll give you +9 handling. Rifled barrel isn't the worst depending on the shotgun you're using, but I personally don't prefer it due to the hit on the handling stat it causes. As for other perks, surplus is always a great option, since it does boost handling to a certain extent when you have your abilities available, and snapshot to make our ADS a touch faster. As for shotguns that I personally use, Fellwinter's Lie is still a very viable option, along with Reese-Walker and Retold Tale. All of these shotguns either have strong stat distributions or stat combos that make them ideal options for this playstyle. For mods, I recommend a dexterity mod that matches your weapon of choice in your primary, so in my case I run the hand cannon dexterity mod. The reason I do this is it helps me stow my hand cannon a little faster, which allows me to switch to my shotgun faster. Combining a high handling stat on your shotgun with a dexterity mod for your primary really allows you to get a very responsive swap speed for cleaning up your opponents. Another option here is the mod Quick Charge, which can greatly increase the ready speed of your shoddy, but this is going to depend on your overall build if you're going to have room to slot this mod. Now when it comes to exotics, this is where you've really seen a shift from the movement exotics as not being the only best option anymore. Handling exotics like Apathettic Aspect and Dragon Shadow are now a lot more popular because of how much they increase the responsiveness of your weapons. As someone who used to never take transversive steps off, once I committed to using Apathettians, I could never go back. Handling exotics like Apathettians give you a distinct advantage in all your fights, since you're able to swap so quickly, especially when using the priming technique I described. It puts you in a position where the enemy literally can't swap weapons as fast as you, and overall makes you a lot more flexible in your engagements, since it doesn't take an hour to swap or reload weapons. But depending on your overall loadout and handling of your weapons, you may opt for a movement exotic that we mentioned earlier, which are always still solid options. Overall, these techniques have really improved my success with shotgunning since the nerf, and if you implement these techniques into your game, you could be finding more success with your shotgun than ever. If you're looking for more ways to improve your overall aim, check out my video at the top of the screen where I go over my best aiming tips, or check out my video at the bottom of the screen to learn what are the best weapons in the current meta.